Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on Sure Trust Employability Day. I'm joined today by 4 of our supply chain partners to have a discussion around the digital delivery of our programs, some of the changes that we've experienced over the last few months, and to debate what future provision might need to look like. So I'm joined by Jude Day, Employability Programme Manager for Sussex Community Development Association, one of our work and health programme providers, and also delivering a range of kind of BBO programmes in East Sussex. Afternoon, Jude. I'm also joined by Jamie Sidaway, National Operations Manager for Health to Employment. We work with Health to Employment on both our work and health programme and our IPES contracts. Sian Clark from Elite Supported Employment Agency, and Sian is Operations Manager and oversees our SES programmes, and Elite also deliver Engage to Change and other local authority contracts in Wales, supporting a range of people from disadvantaged backgrounds. And finally, Phil Ashford, Managing Director of Enterprise Exchange, and delivering specialist self-employment provision for us on our work and health programme contract at the moment, and delivering in a range of other markets, including criminal justice and specifically to other disadvantaged groups. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. As I said, we're here to discuss the digital transition that we've seen in the last couple of months. I'm going to come to you, Jamie, to start with. Obviously, Health to Employment deliver a range of digital services as well as face-to-face and end-to-end provision. I suppose the first question is, how have you found that transition from taking some of that digital provision into other areas of your business?
Yeah, so a mixed bag really across the piece. As you've said, in one sense the business was already kind of set up, so we were lucky on that sense and that side. I think an important point to mention on that aspect though is that service hasn't always been digital. So its original concept was put in place for work programme support, and actually that service was based on the nurse or the health professional being booked in to go out and visit work programme sites and do that intervention face to face. And the reason why it went digital is because it wasn't working effectively, and we found actually it got a better reception from the participants in a more digital format. They could be at home and receive a telephone call, be in more of a comfortable setting, not feel as though their advisor was there and listening in. And actually we got better results out of that. So I think that's an important point to mention, that why we were sort of born into that sort of digital process. So the transition in the new kind of, what we're facing at the moment, that aspect has been really easy on that side of the business. It's been business as usual. But I think also from that, we've been able to demonstrate other additional interventions or services that we can offer digitally that I think previously were kind of assumed wouldn't work, and we've been able to show some of them that can. But then other areas of our business weren't digital format. So IPES that we work with yourselves was an intensive service designed to be face to face and obviously see participants regularly. We also deliver the Access to Work mental health, which was a mix between face to face and telephone interventions, but critical interventions always being face to face. And that then overnight was flicked to a telephone only service, which initially was very positive, but then we started to see problems with participants not being able to open emails all the time, looking at encryption, and finding it difficult to create the same rapport. Equally, I think some of the challenges that the staff have felt, particularly where mental health is concerned, not always been able to see and read body language responses to conversations. So I think it's important going forward, looking at a balance, because I think that digital has its place and really works, but then I think that not losing sight of the human interaction. And I think also from a staff's perspective, we've had staff start to come and say, I'm really missing the face-to-face interaction with participants and customers. But overall, I think, praise to our staff, the ones that have had to divert, because they've done it seamlessly, they've jumped on board with it. We were also fortunate that as we went into lockdown, we were just getting a whole new IT system. So everybody got new laptops, and that's really worked. But I think that's a really key point as well, because that's going to be, key. If your IT isn't up to scratch, if your software's not in place, then the whole thing kind of, it falls down. Whereas we've really seen the benefit of the new software and the new kit as well. So hopefully that gives you enough of an overview, Andy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think we'd all echo in our organisations, like the way that frontline staff or all staff have taken to the new way of working. Whilst it's an interim way of working, they really prioritised beneficiaries and made sure that the support, as much support that can be offered, has been offered. And I think even the fact that we're sat here today is a testimony to organisations getting on board with the digital service. I think another key point you mentioned there is that outside of just the beneficiary and the staff, there are other links and access to work. Especially you've got that employer third party in there, and therefore it's not just whether we can adapt and whether the participant can adapt, which we'll come on and talk to later, but it's how other stakeholders in our services are ready to engage on a digital level as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So thanks, Jamie. I think so. Phil, I know from discussions with you, you've been making that transition as well to a digital service, and it'd be great to hear your experience of how taking something such a specialist service and self-employment is very much about that individual and understanding what they're trying to achieve, and how we've managed to take that online.
Sure, thank you very much. Our program was always very face-to-face, so we used to run one-to-many workshops, one-to-one coaching, peer-to-peer groups. So that was the core of what we did. And bizarrely enough, we went a remote service before COVID even hit. And the reason for that is that we were covering a very large geography on the work and health program. So sometimes it wasn't possible from a cost point of view, but also practicalities, to send someone up to run a workshop for one person in the wilds of Norfolk or wherever it might be. So we had a discussion with the Shore Trust, and we wanted our provision to be really fit for purpose for a particular client group to give them the best chance of success. So what we decided was, rather than have light touch face-to-face, more in-depth remote service. And I'll just go through. So this is around February time we put this together. So the first thing was, before any referral that came to us, we would take on our program. Now we put in an assessment before they even came on, and that is done by us. So therefore, things like basic literacy, to be able to do a business plan, having the right IT equipment, a smartphone, internet connection. So that was the first thing. So suddenly we were getting different people on our programs, and that was quite deliberate, because the provision we were given was fit for purpose for that particular client group. So we then moved from doing business advice on the phone, having a 9-month planned program. We then brought in case managers who also work on the phone, which help with the confidence, self-esteem, and just the accountability side of it. We didn't have that before. We also implemented something called augmented reality, where we have a workbook which we send out to people. And the best way I can put it without doing a demo is, it's like having QR stickers throughout the workbook, and they get a free app on their tablet or their phone, and they just put it over the QR code, and it'll pop up with a video of us teaching. So they've effectively got the course digitally. And we've been running that with the Shore Trust since April, and it's been really successful so far. Where the challenges have been is that, by the very fact of having an assessment, means that some people might be excluded, and we're very aware of that. But what we try and do with the Shore Trust is, if people fail the assessment, we highlight what they need to pass, and then we use that as a recommendation for the Shore Trust support manager to work on. So it could be training on Excel or Word, or get them a second-hand computer. So we still feel that is progression. So even if they might fail the assessment to come on our full program, there will be some recommendations going forward. So I think the key things for us is that because of DWP rules and GDPR, we can't do what we're doing now in terms of face-to-face. It all has to be on the phone. We would love to be able to go to do work on Teams or Zoom to do that. And in the longer term, after COVID, definitely blended in terms of using our program exactly as it is, but having one-to-many workshops if there's enough people to provide them, one-to-one coaching, because everybody's needs are different. In our previous program, some people didn't want to come to the workshops because they might have issues around being in a group of people. So the remote service is perfect for them. But obviously other people, a lot of what we did when we did group sessions was building confidence and engagement. So we think that's missing from our program at the moment. But it has been quite a smooth transition. And I think we were lucky, if that's the right word, that we managed to do this before COVID. So by the time we got to COVID, we didn't really need to transform what we were doing. And as a team, we're a small company, but we've always worked remotely. So we've already used Teams and Zoom. So that wasn't a huge issue for us. But we used to get the team together every month, and we do miss that. And I think there is that going into the office and that human interaction, which is definitely something we'd want to bring back.
Definitely. No, I think you make it, there's two really big important points that come out of that is, as you say, provision, to access this digital provision, there's the digital, the physical accessibility in terms of, do you have the right equipment? Because I think we'd all agree that having poor, not being able to fully engage is worse than not engaging sometimes, from an individual's motivation, and how they feel about digital engagement. It's almost a case of putting somebody with a bad signal or in a bad environment without the right technology can do more damage than actually having that, having a quality telephone call, for example, rather than a face-to-face like a Zoom or a Teams meet. So there's that side of things for the individual. And then, it's how digital layers with, as you say, other provision. So in this case, having a separate service, which might be delivered by a support manager in terms of, for somebody who's digital or remote doesn't perfectly work, but also and as you say, for that motivation, kind of, it's almost that mentoring, isn't it? That you need to be face to face, see that body language, that as you said, Jamie, earlier. And so no, I think that's really insightful. Just one more thing, sorry, it's just one thing I forgot to mention. Managing expectations when the client comes on is absolutely key. They need to know what they expect is coming down the line. And is that so I suppose, is that generally in terms of the content, or are you thinking again kind of their personal skill set in terms of how often they're going to be sat in front of a computer, how much, and the technology they need to engage with? We do that all at the assessment at the beginning, because we think it's vital that they know what's coming and we know if they're going to be able to fit in with that. I guess it's giving them that option, isn't it? Yeah. So no, that's really good. And that leads nicely onto, I know from talking to Jude that you've been doing a lot of work at SCDA on what your current participant, your current caseload, and those that you've worked with, how they can engage with digital, and how they feel about that as a, I suppose I'm going to say a broadly participant group that come from a disadvantaged background, or are harder to help.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my team, we have 37 advisors, various different roles, but that's how many we've got in the team. We weren't, unlike Jamie and Phil, we were not in a position, we were not expecting this. We were all, yes, emails and phone calls, but we were very much a face-to-face group work kind of service, and we're across a reasonably large county. So it was all a bit of a shock. It hit us, and we quickly started to realise that within our own experience, like you were saying, suddenly I had all my managers, coming on weekly to a Zoom meeting or teams, we quickly realised that this is something that we had to get on board with. So the first process that we went through was, okay, so how many of our participants can actually access this? You know, we're not talking about work and health programme in terms of the examples I use, because we haven't had the agreement yet, like you've already mentioned, but the examples I'm going to use are ones that we've used for other projects. But initially, all the projects, we had 354 people we were able to contact. We did that over a 2-week period at the over April. So it was quite soon after the shutdown. And we found out that 94% of our participants, who are mostly furthest from the job market, do in fact want to use IT, but only 76% have access to IT. So why don't they have access? So 46% said they just don't have the IT equipment, and that could be because things are so old, or they just didn't have it in the house, or they've handed it to their children, because obviously we're in a very strange situation with children not being in school. And then 31% said they just can't afford to pay for it. So they might pay for a phone, but, you know, applying for a job or doing anything more than on a basic smartphone was just not possible. And then 17% said that they just didn't have the skills, they were terrified of it, and they just didn't have the confidence. So that is quite a range of statistics that we got, and we broke it down and we thought, how are we going to do this? So we talked to partners about how they've approached it, and we've definitely decided that the way to go was from bottom up. So we asked the advisors first, because we're all in this process together, it was all new. So what did they want to do in terms of delivery? How did they feel about it? Because it was a very mixed response. Out of 37 odd people, we all had a different response to this. And could we try and test it out on ourselves first and get the skills ourselves first before we then went out to the wider participant cohort? And that was where I think some of our successes have lied, because we really sense that people were quite hesitant on this. There were some that were very, yeah, we're doing it already, I'm doing it with my family every weekend, that's fine. But a lot of the colleagues said they were very concerned about policies, protocols, GDPR, safeguarding, etc. So we went through that process first about, you know, how we're going to contact and convey issues around safeguarding, not having mirrors, not having your child walk past, all that kind of thing. So we very much got that process into play first. And then we said to them, okay, so what do you actually want to deliver? And that's where people started coming up with their own strengths. So the advisors were talking about, for example, Motivation Monday is all about explaining to our participants what is coming up that week, who can help them access those courses, whether they're ours or they're just the online free training courses that are available, and how are they going to access it. So for those that had no equipment, East Sussex County Council Library Service was a really good partnership for us. They have a limited, but they were able to supply to people who didn't have any IT equipment, a tablet that had a SIM card in, that had nothing to pay, has a limit on data, and they had volunteers that were able to talk through how to even just switch this on. So a volunteer would pick up the phone, you've had your tablet delivered to you, this is how you do it. So that was a really good example of joining up with another partner who had that ability to quickly go in and deliver an actual, you know, something tangible to that participant. So we quickly got onto that. That proved to be very successful, and we're looking to them and the county to sort of expand that. And we also looked at somebody who provides mainly desktops to people, but he recycles, and it's a charity within our organisation as well. So once we've got people online, it was okay, so how are we going to do this? We've got the process and policies put in place. And then we realised that people were quite nervous, and our guys are quite furthest from the job market. We might go with them to an interview. We might actually go with them to go and buy interview clothes or whatever it might be. So we became virtual buddies. So we said, we will go into this room with you, and if you're comfortable, we will leave. But if you're not, as a virtual buddy, I will stay with you and help explain this. And we started very gently in terms of just a coffee morning type thing. So Motivational Monday is bring your coffee, sit down. This is the people that are on the call right now. I'm, you know, your advisor, who's who, and that's how we started. So we've started very small because we didn't have that experience. And we started from testing it and trialing it within our own groups and our own advisors, and we're kind of building on there. So I can go a little bit later into sort of like some of the responses from participants and how they found this. But it has been, over the weeks, it has been an evolving process. And I don't think we're there yet, but we're certainly on our way to seeing that this has got a really positive place in our menu of various things that we can offer going forward. And I will say, geographically, it's an awful lot easier. So we've been able to pool all the people's knowledge, and actually it doesn't matter whether they're sitting in Hastings or over near Brighton and New Haven. They can cover everybody rather than just the geographical area that we're mainly based in. So is that, I think that will be sort of for the moment, and we can go into how that has been received a little bit later on.
No, yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Jude. And I think it really highlights how external partners. So when it comes to technology, you know, we're primarily, you know, employment support organisations, and not necessarily IT brokers, or you know, and that. But that is such a key part in this. And so moving forward, whether it's providing equipment to individuals to do that in their own home, or working with local authorities to where there are libraries, or there's in-demand kind of community resource, how, you know, how does that open up? How is that available quickly, and how can we integrate, I suppose is the word. How do we integrate with that provision? So no, that's really great. So Sian, I think kind of, if I was leading on from Jude there, I think I know that Elite work with, you know, again, those hardest to help customers, and I know individually on the Engage to Change, those the young people that you support there, it's, you know, is digital an option there, especially as you say with some of the neurodiverse conditions that those individuals have. It'd be interesting to see how those programs, you know, Anna, that have progressed for you.
Yeah, so very similar to some of the other sort of feedback that's been presented today, we've had quite a mixed response, and it has been varied in terms of how the different participants have engaged with us digitally. When COVID first hit us, we had a kind of two-pronged response that we had to deal with. We had to, one, find workarounds and ways of working with all of the individuals that were not in work but were seeking employment. So how we were going to deliver those work activities remotely. But we also had to support a high number of people that were in work, because we provide very intense in-work support through the Pure Supported Employment model via job coaches. And the support we had to provide there was not only to the participant, but also to the employer, to support them through furlough, perhaps reapplying for benefits, suspending access to work, notifying benefits agencies if they were in supported permitted work. So initially we had to sort of firefight and make sure that everybody understood what was happening, you know, because the word furlough was new to us all, wasn't it? You know, and if you're working with somebody with a learning disability and suddenly the employer tells them they're being furloughed, it was quite, you know, a daunting thing to be presented with. So initially we were very, very much, I think there was a huge spike in support there that we had to put in place. We then had to ensure that we were able to engage with you know, a whole number of individuals with learning disabilities, with autism spectrum disorder, and also we have another contract where we were dealing with people with sensory loss. So we had to be mindful, if it's sight or hearing loss, how, you know, digital technology was good for them. And in some cases that's proved to be really good, and in other areas it's proved a challenge. Some of the things that we've found is that it's not always a preferred method of communication, and some participants don't like the idea of having their face on a screen. We've had to devise ways, and we'll turn the camera off, you can just do sound. We've had to try and find ways of encouraging them to get used to the idea of talking digitally, rather than being full on trying to deliver a job club or work related activities with them, and find ways of sort of softening it so that it becomes more natural. I know you talked about having virtual mentors. We've been doing a lot with virtual volunteering. So we've implemented very similar things with coffee mornings that our volunteers have been running, where they're much more social, so that our participants are getting used to the idea of talking via Teams or Zoom, or having, you know, catch-up meetings over the phone. And, you know, we are starting to see things progress, and we're learning different techniques of how we can engage those individuals. We do have, similar to things that have already been said, a number of issues in terms of not everybody has access to technology, so that has proved to be a problem. But one of the other areas I think we've had to do a lot of work with is managing anxiety. And so in order to stop those participants that are furthest from the labour market becoming further from it again, it's maintaining mental health. So one of the things we've done where we have staff members who are trained in mental health support, mindfulness, is we have identified a number of staff members across the organisation who are mental health champions, and they've put together leaflets, useful tips on positive thinking, things you can do to stay motivated. And those sessions are available for not only our staff but for our participants. So where it's identified that they need additional wellbeing support, we have telephone or video calls set up to for them to have conversations with our mental health champions, so we can try and help people stay positive and alleviate a lot of anxiety. High levels of anxiety have been a massive thing that we've had to deal with. And I think one of the areas we've tried to drive in this, in the absence of not necessarily being able to job find in the way we normally would, and also having to look at certain ethics in terms of, is it right to put a person into a workplace who might not understand a 2 metre, there has been employment opportunities out there, but if you're dealing with an individual who doesn't understand what 2 metres social distancing is, or perhaps doesn't even understand the whole idea of how the bug is, the virus is spread, is it ethical then to put certain people forward for certain roles? So what we've been doing is we've done a lot of work with our awarding body to develop our accredited training, not only for existing units that we deliver, but having different ways of evidencing their learning, particularly if you've got people who are not able to, their literacy skills are very limited, through using video footage and other methods, and using a combination of ways of evidencing that. And from this, we've also had experience now where we've had to support people back into the workplace. And whereas it's very mixed, so we'll have some people that will still need job coaching on the job with tasks and with their skills. We've also found that it's how that individual safely moves back into the work if they're coming off furlough. And this will also, we've done this also to aid those who've never worked or gone into the workplace before. So we've developed a unit which we're waiting to have accredited, and it's promoting safe practice with COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. And that allows us to deliver the training to, one, explain what the virus is, two, how that impacts on not just in the workplace but travel to work, because one of the supports we provide for our participants is travel training on a one-to-one basis. And so it's a whole package designed at how you socially distance, how you, when you get on a bus, you handle money or your bus pass safely, not touching your face. It covers personal hygiene, the use of PPE, and obviously social distancing then in the workplace. And then that is evidenced either through being in the workplace or via role play within our virtual, or when it comes to it, again, face-to-face job clubs. So that's something that we've found as being a very, very important part of the support, where people are being now eased out of lockdown and going back into work. So I think that that sort of, I don't want to repeat some things that have already been said by others, but those are some of the things that we've been working with to deal with the hardest to help.
No, that's really interesting, and there's some common themes I think coming out here in terms of, it's a new experience for everyone, and I suppose at a professional level, how we work with our staff teams to ensure that they are that they're getting the support when working from home as well is important, but also that learning new techniques, whether it's Motivation Mondays, which sounds a really good initiative, or if it is how do you support new skills. So some some digital skills. The digital skill level for a member of frontline staff has had to take a step up as well to to lead those individuals. And so I think at a staffing at an organisational level, there's some common traits there, and then equally from a participant point of view, making sure that there are a range of provision. Like we've coped through this time and we've adapted and we've made sure that support is out there. But I suppose as professionals, we can see that there are gaps, or there are things that definitely would work better when doing face-to-face. Whether that's simply the accessibility to a service, which means there's groups who can't necessarily access everything, or it is that baseline level of engaging on a confidence, a motivation, managing anxiety, managing mental health. So no, I think that's really interesting. I think what we wanted to talk about as well was how we take this forward into future provision. COVID is a very short period of time to do any form of learning and any kind of learning and evaluation. I suppose, again, I come back to Jamie in terms of you've got that blended approach within your organisation. And I guess that's something that it seems we'd advocate in terms of future provision as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, part of going into future provision, I do think there needs to be more options available to participants when they come onto those programs, so that they have more of a say and more of a steer, so that you are giving those that feel really digitally savvy and feel as though they can maybe go through an accelerated program the option to do that. Some others that maybe have to take that slower approach and the face-to-face go down that route. And I think that way then you're not excluding anybody, but at the same time you're not saying everybody has to go through a face-to-face provision if somebody can do something a little bit more tech savvy or quicker. And I think it gives more flexibility to providers as well. I think a few people have kind of touched on the subject, but we've seen efficiencies across our programs, cut down on travel expenses. Our access to work provision is a prime example of that, where we're now doing that all over the phone or over a platform like this, where we can do so many more appointments and support so many more people in a day, as opposed to a staff member being stuck on a motorway for an hour and a half there and back just to see one person. And so actually being able to support more people is beneficial for that. I do think in the future, mental health, and again, it's come up in everybody's kind of dialogue, hasn't it, as we've been going through the call, that it's going to be rife. I think that we're already seeing that. So as a provider that does focus predominantly on health, through our health assessments, it was high already from the people that we deal with on work and health programme. But it's interesting, we were doing a review last Friday with our lead occupational therapist, and he was saying that at least 4 out of 5 people now that they do that assessment with, there is some sort of severe mental health concern there, which has gone up from probably, where it was like 40% before. So you can just see already there. And then also our access to mental health provision, the volume of people accessing that. So it's hitting people on the employment market and the unemployed. And I think, you've got masses of people that are going to have been suddenly out of work, totally unexpected through no fault of their own, in a really probably difficult employment market. So I think mental health is going to have to be right at the heart of any future provision in terms of helping people with that, using specialists. And I think further collaboration across providers as well, where you've got more access to different specialists. Again, IPES is a perfect example of that, where it hits the neurodiverse, it hits the more generic employability, and obviously it hits the health aspect as well. So I think that needs to all go into that kind of consideration. And I think everybody has to move forward and embrace digital, but I think also not lose sight of some of the core key elements that have stood employability contracts in good stead over the years as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, there's a wealth of evidence which shows how the past employment provision that DWP maybe centrally, but also ESFA, Big Lottery have commissioned to a wide range of participant groups have had a great impact. I think digital gives us an option to change the way we support certain groups, but as you say, we don't want to lose sight of, you know, what has been working well, where it is still possible. There are things that can't be replicated. So I think that's a really good point. And I know, you know, when we're talking about transition again, like Phil, you talked earlier about that transition you're making, but how we evaluate the impact change. So we know we've got studies, we've had whole program evaluations, a range of things in the past. We've got a really short period of time now, this 3 months, where we've made changes to parts of programs. Evaluation is going to be really important to learn from it as well.
Definitely. And what we're looking at everything we're doing and evaluating it as we're going along, because we've had to change our program. And it's quite interesting because we're choosing the people that come on our program, we're actually getting higher outcomes. But that doesn't mean to say that's because of digital or because we're doing it in a certain way. And just echoing a little bit what Jamie was saying is that the technology is not going to go away. And new things are kind of come on stream. And for example, we're going to be piloting doing virtual reality courses in prisons, but we're not doing it because of the technology. It's because a lot of people in prison can't access decent education outside of their cell, that actually being in virtual reality in an outside environment improves mental health. So what we're trying to do is not just evaluate the outcomes, but how it will work for the particular participant that we're working with. And I think it's very much horses for courses, is that our program, we've picked a particular type of participant, so we can evaluate that particular type of participant. But I think all the other things that we could deliver are still as valid, because it's be a different type of participant gets value from different types of delivery.
Yeah, hugely. I think, as you say, if anything, there could be, I think there's going to be a potential move to there being more specialist provision, but really, like you say, focusing on where a cohort or group of individuals will really benefit from digital. But then also next to that, there may be a different group that the same course or the same core content needs to be delivered in a different way to have the same level of impact.
And just an example on what the job market might look like is we're going to see a large amount of people going unemployed. You'll find that the people most hard to reach are going to find it the most difficult to get traditional employment. Therefore, self-employment might become more of an option for them. But also a lot of people who will be becoming unemployed might want to go self-employed, but it might be really light touch what you need to do with them.
Yeah.
So it could be two ends of the spectrum in terms of delivery.
Yeah, I think, you know, for all of our programs, as you say, that what the unemployment market looks like, I think DWP have dealt with like 2 million claims in the last few months. You know, the majority of those individuals may have been in work for, you know, 2 years plus. And actually, we've all experienced our own work support, but actually once somebody gets set into a routine and they're in job and they've, you know, maybe sustained from a contractual perspective, but we're talking 6-12 months down the line, that individual who you may come meet with or see for different reasons is a totally different individual to the person who you worked with for 18 months on a program. And therefore, you know, the support they require when falling out of work will be very different. So no, I think that light touch option is something the department will have to consider. And I suppose the other thing to consider, Jude, coming back to kind of what your participants have said, is that just because somebody may have been in work for a period of time doesn't necessarily mean they're not suffering from digital isolation, digital exclusion. So there's a further variable there that we have to consider when thinking about what they want and what they feel would benefit them.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Do you think that at the moment jobs are being maintained through furlough and the job retention scheme, but obviously that will come to an end, and that there needs to be a further focus on job retention, maybe an expansion via access to work, in terms of how support can be given to employers who are struggling as they come out of COVID, so that rather than see unemployment figures go higher, there needs to be something in place that helps maintain those individuals stay in their job to prevent them becoming unemployed. And I think that's something that we definitely need to be looking at. there's very few contracts around at the moment that focus solely on job retention. You know, it's all about getting people into work, and really the only thing out there is access to work, and that's a different model in terms of accessing it. So I don't know what people think about how that's going to look moving forward, and if there's a need for that.
I think definitely, in terms of just in our world, we're seeing a lot of people who have gone self-employed and are now going back into benefits. So we're almost thinking about how can we support those people. I think it's a similar thing. Sorry to butt in.
No, Phil, I was going to say that one of the strengths of the Work and Health programme is that ability to offer in-work support, whereas programs that were written a long time ago and Building Better Opportunities has a lot of very, very good things about it, but one of them is once they're in work, you don't work with them. No. So you know, it's exactly right. We need to make sure that that in-work support is there to ensure that people, maybe because they might have multiple jobs now, you know, we might go back to that sort of like where somebody does a little bit of self-employment but does also some work over here just to make ends meet because they've lost their normal kind of money coming into the household. And I would say as well that from our point of view, we are interviewing people at the moment. So as an organisation, I am doing this to interview. This has been a that we want to pass on to our participants about how do you actually approach an online interview, because it is a different experience, and just coping with the IT from all points of view. You know, HR, I've been doing this for many years, but one of the ladies was actually quite nervous about it, you know, having this was a new way of doing it. So from our point of view, we want to make sure that that kind of experience of getting the jobs, but we were primarily seeing people that have recently been made redundant who had work before this had come through. They've seen an advert come out and they're looking to see how their skills can be transferred over. So it's obviously not the people that I would have normally seen somebody coming from an employment contract onto another employment contract. It's people that we have to work with who've got transferable skills and make sure that they fit, you know, the new profile, the new job that they're going for. So I would completely agree. We have to work in a very different way. And we have had somebody come on who has been, their furlough came to an end and they're now unemployed, but he hadn't applied for a job in 15 years. So though he's been working for 15 years, his ability to actually apply and, you know, even think about it was really scary for him. So I think we're all going to have a 360-degree look at this, because the people that we have previously been working with in that time before COVID-19 hit, they were fairly low level ability, low level education, furthest from the job market. Our guys, our advisors, are going to have to become upskilled very quickly in working with somebody who might have been in work for 15 years but hasn't applied for anything, to somebody who's got a degree, who's come out of a local university and is looking for a new job, not as a graduate but as somebody who's worked there. So our guys are going to have to become much more flexible and nimble in their approaches as well. And I would say, going back to the virtual stuff, one thing we have tried to do is make it fun, and we have tried to make it something that is enjoyable. And they have come back to us, initial trials that we've done, the feedback we've had is they are looking forward to it. It's something to look forward to. It's fun. They're developing relationships in that group dynamic that you normally get sitting in a room. Well, they're seeing that online. They've really liked the breakout rooms, because they felt, again, that has actually enabled them to be more relaxed and formal like we are now, but then the breakout room has enabled them to chat a bit more. They've said as well that what they've liked is when we've talked to them about various things that within and outside of SCDA. So we've had people come in to present what training they do, explain that, and then we've seen increased engagement go up because they've seen it. So it's a bit like, you know, when you used to have your speaker come in and, you know, say this is the next program, this is the person who can support you on this. But actually you can have more people do that, and you can have a sort of a very focused aspect to it. So this week we're doing mindfulness, like you've already mentioned, and this person does this, and that has opened up our world and our reach and our engagement considerably. The other thing we are mindful of, though, is that a lot of our guys were quite happy to be at home, and we worked very hard to get them out and to meet them in that local coffee shop. And then the government said you can't go into a coffee shop, and now we've got to go all back again and work and cover ground that we've already covered. And although we are loving that whole ability to deliver things in this kind of platform, we also are mindful that we do not want to encourage people to get more and more entrenched in their home. Because some people, especially some of our younger cohort, have become very comfortable, perhaps too comfortable at home. And I know there are risks, and I know everybody has their own sort of ability to sort of sit there and manage their risk, but we have to also make sure that we don't encourage too much of the home stuff, and we do get people out and we do get them seeing face-to-face work in the future again.
No, definitely. Jamie,
I
do you
think
want to
parents have got quite comfortable with the younger ones that we work with, where they've got the children at home and they know they're safe as well. So the drive for parents to kind of motivate to leave the house because they're so anxious and concerned about people catching the virus, that they're quite comfortable and they're getting used to the fact, oh no, they're home, they're safe, I know they're safe. And I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward when we want to start trying to encourage people to get out again.
Definitely. Jamie, do you want to come in and with?
Yeah, I was going to make a couple of points. One of them being literally what Jude has just said about, there is a danger that, some of these programs have been built on trying to get people out of their homes. And I think, again, we as human beings are very good, aren't we, at getting in habits and bad habits as well. And I think one thing that lockdown could have created is that phobia of people going out, phobia of human interaction. And I think there's some real dangers with that. And again, a pure digital model, whilst there are benefits to it, from an end-to-end perspective, I don't think would be ideal, because even though we have that digital assessment, we still rely on that being applied in a welfare to work model that an advisor then takes that person forward with. So yeah, that was just to piggyback on that point. And then the other thing I was just going to throw something in the conversation around kind of looking at trying to encourage people back to the market or keep people in jobs. I know it's something that the government have done in the past on previous programs, and especially when we had the economic downturn, was it incentivizing employers. So are we going to see that come back in, the golden tickets, the 18 to 24s, encouraging people to take up self-employment? It's maybe a bit of an assumption or a stab in the dark, but I do think that probably you will see something around that, which I think would be a positive step as well, and encouraging that growth of the economy again.
Yeah,
and I think with the younger people, we've done some work with sort of 16 to 24-year-olds. Technology actually can be quite good in getting them to engage in education. Sometimes ones who maybe failed at the classroom at 14, give them a VR headset or something a bit whizzy, and they love it. And and like you say, making it fun, really key.
Yeah.
Well, I think from what we've been saying, I think it's I think there's a lot of benefits, and obviously what we've been able to do through digital in the last 3 months is support individuals that I suppose without it we just wouldn't have been able to. And so being managed to keep people who engaged in programs to support those maybe experience social isolation, maybe digital isolation, it's been really positive. However, what we're also doing is doing this ongoing lessons learned activity of what works digitally and what doesn't. And when it doesn't, how do we blend the two together to ensure that they're engaging programs, that those who are maybe more comfortable with digital are still being attracted into offices and into co-locations, community venues, to get them used to that activity, that structure of a working week that we're ultimately aiming to get them into, whilst also feeling comfortable, addressing their mental health and ensuring that we do what the industry does in terms of preparing people to make that transition, which is one of the largest transitions that people go through from long-term unemployment back into employment. So we've covered a lot of ground there. There's obviously a lot to go on to, and we know, as Jamie said, there will be things coming out, whether it's changes in the future budget that we're expecting for employers, whether it will be through employment support programs that DWP commission, or whether it is just through expansion of existing programs. There is going to be a support need there, and it's important that we all as organisations develop the right tools to hit the ground running and meet that demand that is ultimately going to be there. I'll open up to any final comments if anyone has any.
I'd just like to say that obviously from the Universal Credit, that enormous amount of people that joined it, they must have gone online and they've obviously used and have been competent enough to get through the Universal Credit system. So I'm slightly wary that that implies to the DWP that therefore these people are all okay at doing that. So yeah, just a little bit about that inclusion agenda again, just saying to them, just because they've done it this once doesn't mean to say, you know, they might have had some help, or they've, you know, we don't want to forget the ones that can't do it because they didn't have to do it. They walked into a job centre and met with a coach.
Yeah. Can I come in there? And I think that's a really important point, because it could give a false impression. Because when I talked earlier about supporting individuals onto furlough and coming out of work, one of the big things we had to do was help them and support them with universal credit claims, with their universal credit account, and that was part of what we were doing. So a lot of these individuals do need help with that, and it can present a false picture of what they're actually capable of doing. And I think that that is a really important point.
And just one thing from me is that our participants, we send them a physical workbook and a physical journal, and they love that as much as the digital, to have something in their hands that they can use, and we never want to get rid of that.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, guys, I'll finish up by saying thank you for taking the time out to join us today and to talk about what's a really important topic, and making sure we shape future provision. You know, we look forward to Shore Trust working with you guys in that transition, in current programs and future programs, and I know that we'll keep working to ensure that we all support those beneficiaries as best we can and in line with guidance. I'm sure we're looking forward to being able to get back and seeing those participants face to face and meeting those challenges that we know the employment market and the economy are going to throw at us over the next couple of years. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much. It was nice to meet you.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank
Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah.